Okay, so what we're going to look at is this video is going to talk to us about the circulation system. Now, the other day we walked through the blood flow on our circulatory system. So, what we're now going to do is kind of a backpedal, and we are going to look at where circulation started from, or some of the differences that other animals have in their circulation. So, as we're listening to this first part of the video, I want us to think about similarities and differences between open and closed systems or closed circulatory systems. So he's going to talk about open and closed circuits. So I want us to be listening and thinking about those similarities and differences, and then we're going to write those in our foldable notes.
We're just going to give a brief presentation today of how circulation systems differ in different animals. We're going to spend most of our time talking about how vertebrate circulation systems in particular are different and how things have changed over evolutionary history. So just to start out, not all animals actually have a circulation system. In some cases, animals like sponges, also the cnidarians, that includes animals like sea anemones and jellyfish. They don't actually have any kind of blood or blood vessels or circulation system at all. Their bodies are set up such that basically all of their body cells are very closely contacting seawater around them, and they can bring all of the materials that they need into each body cell through just simple diffusion with the environment around it. That's not very typical of most other animals, though. So we're going to see this trend toward a circulatory system in most other animals. Perhaps as the animal body plan got bigger, thicker, deeper, those body cells kind of deeper inside the body are going to need a circulation system to deliver the materials that are needed to keep the cell alive. So we're going to see circulation systems in most other creatures. There is a basic distinction between open and closed circulation that I'll briefly go through. As it turns out, not all animals have tubes that lead blood all around the body. They still have a heart pump here that pushes the liquid around and keeps it moving, but it very quickly exits through a very simple set of tubes, and I want you to just to imagine that this circulatory liquid just kind of bathes all of the body organs and body cells. It can be pushed perhaps to respiratory centers to pick up new oxygen and to drop off carbon dioxide, so it still works, but there's just no tubing leading everywhere. So we just say that that's an open circulatory system. We tend to find this in smaller animals. So there are some mollusk groups that includes animals like clams and snails and animals like that. Also insects might have more typical open circulatory systems. But by and large, most animals that we're going to discuss at least have a closed circulatory system. So we still have that heart pump that creates the push, that pushes liquid into other liquid and keeps it moving around the body, except in this case it's a closed system because that liquid always stays contained within some kind of tubing. We'll generally talk more about arteries and capillaries and veins at a later time in a future video, but that's the basic closed system.
We're going to look at an open system first. So I want us to look at an open system. So we have an open circuit. Does it have tubes and things? No. Okay. So the fluid is free flowing. So the fluid freely moves. So there are no vessel confinement. No, or minimal, right? Minimal. Minimal? So, no vessel confinement. No vessel confinement. It would be minimal if there is. What does take place though? The same that in a closed and an open. Yeah, they're still going to transfer oxygen. So I still have my gas exchange. So gas exchange still happens. And what's getting everything to move around? There's still a pump, okay? So that there is a pump action. So the pump is going to push the fluid. Okay. So I'm going to have my heart, right? Because my heart's my pump. So it's open because I got to make my little, right, I have some little valves. So just like in our system where it pushes and then it closes so it doesn't go back up, that's the same concept that's going to happen with when we push it out. So that fluid is going to be pumped out. So my fluid gets pumped out the valves. All right, and then I've got my tissues. So this is my tissue that's systemic or body, right? The body system. And that is going to then flow the fluid back into the heart. And what kind of animals were these? Non-mammals. And not just non-mammals, because a reptile doesn't have an open circuit, right? A reptile is going to have veins and things. So we're looking at snails, clams, invertebrates, my things without a backbone. So my example are my invertebrates. I forgot an R. There's an R in there. Invertebrates. Snails, clams, those things. So like think about when you take the crickets and if you poke a hole in the cricket, it like just leaks everywhere. But like if you poke a hole in a human, we don't necessarily leak everywhere, right? You have to hit a blood vessel for that to happen. Like when you squish a spider, just go splat. We don't do that, right? That's because they have an open circuit. Okay, so now we've got a closed circuit. So what's going to be true about a closed circuit? Fluid's not free flowing, right? Cool. Good, the fluid's contained. So we have veins, arteries, capillaries. And then what else does it have in common with the open circuit? There's a pump. For a closed circuit, what type of animals are going to have a closed circuit? Vertebrates. So vertebrates are going to have a closed circuit system. So we have our heart. Got like my pipes. So this is going to go to my capillaries, right? So this is my tissue, my capillaries. This is my body, my system. Systemic and body, yep. So they're kind of interchangeable. Is we're going to take this closed circuit now, and now we're going to examine what the closed circuit looks like. Okay, so now we're going to look at, we talk about this open versus closed. Now we're going to take a magnifying glass over a closed circuit, and we're going to dive into a closed circuit. What we're going to end up finding is going to be a single loop and a double loop. So he's going to talk about a single loop system and a double loop system. So what I want us to do again is think about similarities and differences about those two as we're watching.
Circulatory system in this video, and I'm interested in just kind of tracing how the vertebrate circulation has changed. We're going to talk about three major groups to think about and how things have changed. We're going to start with the fish circulatory system and how it's set up and how it's fairly basic and maybe a problem with it. That later land vertebrates, we think the first land vertebrates were the amphibians. These include things like frogs and salamanders. How they have changed in order to improve upon that problem with the fish system. As it turns out, it creates a solution, but it also creates a new problem that later mammals and birds are going to evolve to fix. Mammals include anything like anything with hair or fur, like the cow, mice, cats, dogs, humans, and also birds have this solution as well. The balance of evidence suggests that perhaps mammals and birds evolved this solution independent of each other. As it turns out, reptiles are vertebrates as well, and your book does briefly put reptiles in this story. I'm going to leave reptiles out for the most part because different reptiles are somewhat like amphibians in that they sort of have their system without the solution that mammals and birds have. Other reptiles are more like mammals and birds, and then, interestingly enough, some reptiles are sort of in between with the solution that we're going to eventually present. So I'm not as concerned with reptiles and where exactly they sit. They sort of show this interesting evolutionary half transition between the major event between amphibians and mammals and birds. So let's get to it. This is kind of a basic schematic of what a fish circulation system might look like. It's something that we would call a single loop circulation system. The blood goes to the heart to be pumped, but the heart only pumps it once in the overall circuit. In this case, the heart is going to pump blood toward the gills. Remember that fish are going to be aquatic, so they have gills to reoxygenate their blood. That blood is then just sort of delivered without going back to the heart again to the body in circulation. The oxygen is dropped off, and then the blood returns to the heart. All of these schematics are going to use this red-blue system, blue for deoxygenated blood, red for oxygenated blood. Blood doesn't actually look like that when it's deoxygenated. It doesn't look blue. It's actually kind of a dark red. Your vessel walls are blue, especially if you are pale like me. You might be able to see them particularly well. But those are your vessel walls, not your actual blood within them. but blue versus red is pretty easy to see, so I'm willing to keep going with that in this particular video. So that's the basic fish system. What's the problem with this system? The problem is that the blood travels rather slowly, especially if you get further and further away from the heart. So the heart pumps, and with that pump from the ventricle, blood travels very fast, but as you get further and further away from the source of the pump, so maybe especially as blood is traveling from the gills toward the body cells, it's going to be tremendously slow here because it's so far away from the source of the original pump. Fluid is still pushing on other fluid, but it's also meeting resistance from the vessel walls, and so things are slowing down. And by the time it finally gets back to the heart, it's extremely slow, and then it's going to be pumped back out again. So how does the amphibian circulatory system fix this? Here is a basic schematic of the amphibian system. The new innovation is they have what we call a double loop circulatory system. Or the key idea here is that once again there is a ventricle part of the heart that pumps the blood toward the lungs. Lungs in this case, because amphibians are going to be on land, as adults anyway. The blood gets reoxygenated, but this time it goes back to the heart. And the heart pumps it a second time, pumps it to the body cells, unlike what we saw in fish. So it gets there faster. And then when the blood and the oxygen is delivered to the body cells, it's going to travel back to the heart to be pumped to the lungs again. So this idea of a double loop circulation is simply the idea that the heart pumps twice in one circuit. It pumps to the lungs, and then the lung, after that, it returns back.
Single loop first. Start with the drawing. Okay, so I've got my heart. Okay, so we have our heart. The fluid is going to go from the heart to my gills. And the fluid from the heart to the gills, does it have oxygen on it or no? Deoxygenated. Or you can put deoxygenated, you can write deoxygenated, you can write carbon dioxide rich. It's my deoxygenated blood. I go to the gills, gas exchange happens. So now it's oxygen rich blood. It goes to my fish. So it goes into the whole body. Then it flows back into the heart. So just the deoxygenated blood is going to go back to the heart, because remember the bodies use the oxygen, so just writing deoxygenated blood is going back into that heart. So how many pumps do I have? Just a one pump action. Okay. Since I only have one pump action, what was one of the downfalls of this? It's slow. Slow flow of the fluid. And what animal has this? Fish. So really our thing to note here is that the blood goes from the heart to gills to body, back to the heart. So the heart to the gills, to the body, to the heart. Ready for a double loop? What makes a double loop special? Why is it called a double loop? I pump twice now, right? Okay, so I'm going to pump twice. So I'm going to start in the center with my heart. And you guys know hearts really don't look like that. Heart pumps to what? The lungs. All right, so my heart pumps to the lungs. Or my pulmonary system, right? And then it pumps back, right? So it goes to and from my lungs. Here's my lobes. So that's my lungs. And then where's the second pump action? The body. My stick figure dog. So it's got two pump actions. So that means my blood is going to the heart twice. What was one of the benefits of this? So I have an increased pressure, which means I have a fast flow of fluid. And then what animals? So we have mammals. All mammals do this. All birds are avians. And then reptiles and amphibians. So this one, and I kind of ran out of room. We go to the heart, to the lungs, to the heart, to the body, to the heart. So I go heart, lungs, heart, body, heart, lungs, heart, body, to the heart, and then repeat. So I've got a 2-loop. All right, so now what we're going to do is take a magnifying glass into that closed loop system, right? So we have the closed loop. So now what I'm going to do is take a magnifying glass on that closed loop system, and he's going to talk about our hearts. All right, so now I'm going to look at and try to compare and contrast this 3-chambered heart with a 4-chambered heart.
And so blood gets everywhere faster in this system. That's definitely the big advantage of this system. As it turns out, it actually creates a new problem, though, that the fish never had. Because 2 types of blood are now coming back to the heart. The blue blood is coming back to the heart just like it did in the fish, but also the freshly oxygenated red blood is now coming back as well. And there's just this one common ventricle in the middle where potentially some of that blood might actually get mixed. So some of the, certainly most of the blue blood is still sent toward the lungs because that's sort of the area where it comes from. Most of the red blood is sent to the body, but there is some admixture. and that can actually potentially be problematic, especially if you think of sending some blue blood toward the body cells, and they don't have any oxygen to deliver. As it turns out, this apparently works for amphibians, but not for energetically demanding mammals and birds. We're going to talk next unit about what makes mammals and birds so demanding of energy. The brief answer is that they are endotherms. Endothermy carries advantages to it, but it's also much more energy demanding. And so their body cells are going to require more oxygen. They need to do more respiration on average than, say, an amphibian. So how are they going to be even more efficient? They retain the double loop circulation that the amphibian system had, with its advantage of being faster, and they're going to fix the problem of mixture of the two types of blood by simply having this wall-like structure in the heart. Your book calls that the septum, that prevents the blue and red blood from mixing. So here is blue blood returning back from the body. It comes back to an atrium, the sort of entryway to a heart. The atrium feeds the ventricle, and the ventricle only pumps that blue blood to where it needs to go, to the lungs. The blood picks up oxygen at the capillaries surrounding the lungs and returns back to the heart, back to the other side of the heart, returning again to an atrium that feeds the ventricle, but this ventricle now only pumps to the body. So red blood always gets to where it needs to go, fast, because it's a double loop circulation. Blue blood always gets to where it needs to go, fast. Things are getting places fast and to the correct place, so the overall system is more efficient.
Three-chambered heart. So now what I'm doing is I am taking my double loop system. I'm pretty much putting the magnifying glass on my double loop system, right? And now I'm going to open it up a little bit more and dig deeper. So I have a three-chambered heart. Now, this is definitely, you can dig deeper into this, right? This is very rough drawing, just so we can see the different chambers of this chambered heart. So I'm going to draw my heart first. I'm going to do, like, it almost looks like a tongue, if you were going to draw a tongue, or like a valley. So I'm going to start on my side, and then I'm going to go down, and I'm going to make like a loop, and then I'm going to come back up. So it's like a downhill. And then I'm going to make like a curvy V up at this top. Whoop. And I'm going to make another one that's symmetric. Whoop. Now I'm going to do dotted lines because those are going to be my valves, right? Because we still have valves for the inwards flow. And that kind of helps sort the chambers out. 1, 2, 3. Blood flows in. And then blood flows out. My chambers. My first chamber is the right atrium. The second chamber is the left atrium. Any guesses to what the third chamber is called? It's a ventricle. Mm-hmm. So the issue with this one, if I'm flowing in from my body and from my lungs, what happens in this ventricle? Mixes, right? So the blood can mix. So my oxygenated and my deoxygenated blood can mix. And then who has this system? Our amphibians are going to have it. So like your frogs, right? Your toads, your salamanders, your amphibians, and non-crocodilian reptiles. So that's our 3 chambers. So now I'm going to look at 4-chambered hearts. So now with this one, I'm going to do that same downward hill, like the hill that I did first. But I'm only going to do one on the top. Whoop! Okay? And then like that. And then since I actually have cell walls and things, or like that membrane, I'm going to draw an X in the middle. So then I have 1. If you want to number the chambers in order the blood flow, do the 2 on the bottom, and then the 3 and the 2 would be flip-flopped. So if you want to do the flow of blood, flip-flop the 2 and the 3. So we have, the first chamber is what? Right atrium. The other atrium is called, then what are the chambers at the bottom? Right and left ventricle. Good. So we have oxygen and deoxygenated blood. What? Did they ever meet each other? Nope. So they never mix. So then the animals that have 4-chambered hearts, we have mammalians, avians, right, which are birds. And then what type of reptiles? Crocodilian reptiles. So then those are the reptiles. Those will have 4-chambered hearts.